Humanity had won against all odds, with our species' population cut down to a third of its original amount due to the might of the Covenant. To say that the human race wasn't struggling to some degree would be a lie. With the final destruction of the pact between the Sanshyum and Sangheli, this splintering would ensure that the human race could also take a collective breath and begin the arduous task of rebuilding, which would ultimately turn out to be our undoing. As the years passed and it seemed that we were getting back on our feet, an energy source would be discovered that could power the outer colonies at first, and then eventually the core colonies. It was easy enough to discover due to slipspace portals that were already being created by ships. The UNSC had kept it under wraps, but also had known for a long time that when entering slipspace, an energy signature would surround the ships, but was usually disregarded due to the ship's shielding. But now that humanity wasn't currently engaged in a battle to prevent its own extinction, they would begin experimenting with this energy. Its red glow from the universe plane that it seems to originate from, through their experimentation and close working with the energy, as well as the portal usage, they began to realize that there was an entire plane of existence associated with this energy, and it reminded them of the religions humans had hundreds of years prior, which all referenced a singular place, hell. Regardless of where it came from, it was an energy to be used just like any other, and with nuclear fusion reactors in short supply, this energy would be turned to for its ability to help rebuild society. It started quietly enough. Outer colonies would begin going dark. Thinking it was a Sangheli once more, this would sow seeds of discontent between humans and these aliens as an attack on site order was issued. As time progressed, however, more and more leftover colonies would continue to go silent. Ships were dispatched to determine what happened, but the few reports from the ground report hellish growths dipping down from the sky and rising from the ground. A cancerous-like growth of flesh covered the walls and buildings. No animal life appeared to be present. Viewed clearly from space, symbols appeared on the planet. The teams on the ground were ripped to shreds, usually shortly after transmission. Fearing the flood had returned, planets exhibiting these symbols and growths were immediately bombarded and destroyed in an effort to contain the growing threat. By this point, more inner colonies had also begun to go dark, as well as their own symbols appearing on those planets as well. And coupled with this, numerous distress calls began going out. As humanity pulled back to Earth, much like they had during the Human Covenant War, colonies were left on their own until the war-weary humans could get a foothold once more. And this time, due to the feud with the Sangheli and their assumed tampering with colonies, there would be no aid coming from the tenuous alliance there once was. And because of this, once again, humanity was on its own to solve its own problems. Eventually, however, a call for help does make it through. On a military training colony, the soldiers held out long enough to study their enemies somewhat before being overrun. The report states before it was cut out that portals, much like these slipspace portals humanity had been using for years, began opening up all over the planet. These portals did not appear to need machinery and instead could be opened up at specific points regardless of security measures. Aggressive creatures will utilize these portals and begin attacking any and all things, including one another. These unknown contacts range from about human size to well over 3 times that. What's worse is as these creatures poured through, the very environment they walk on begins to be corrupted. Seen on other colonies, flesh grows at random, tentacles dip down from the sky, but it's not just that. Any countermeasure implemented seems to only delay these creatures at best and have no effect on them at worst. They do not care for their personal well-being and will continue to press the attack regardless of what's put down range. The portals seem to have something to do with the energy that was discovered, as the portals appear to be made of the same stuff. After this discovery, it wasn't too long before Earth was under siege as well. This energy, known as Argent, had been integrated into almost every facet of human life. Homes, mechs, ships, vehicles, medical buildings, Mac cannons, all use some form of Argent energy to power it. With its far-reaching usage on the planet, portals began popping up in Europe first as a super gore nest was established. The battle was brutal between the UNSC and these creatures, but even with their technology, when they destroyed one, 10 more would take their place. It wasn't too long before over 60% of the planet had been conquered by the teeming hordes. Civilians began to be evacuated in droves out of the solar system while Earth was still being fought for. But it became increasingly evident that it was only a matter of time before the military was overrun. These creatures were unlike anything humanity had ever faced, and with their numbers already slashed from the battles with the Covenant, things were not looking good. In the most infested areas or in targeted areas of sensitive military information or projects, Spartans would be sent in for seek and destroy missions. The top brass feared that if classified military projects fell into the hands of the enemy, then this would further aid them in their bizarre conquest against humanity. But not just that, but the rally points that were established for fleeing ships and the congregation points for civilians using older fusion reactor ships as Argent ships seemed to spawn in these creatures. If these rally points were found, the last remaining humans would be wiped out, and this could not be allowed. One such creature having knowledge of these points and orchestrating a defense of the planet is an AI that was brought back to Earth in secret. Originally created to aid the Forerunners in their battle battles against the Flood, it was now aiding humanity in the counterattacks against the demons brought on by the Argent energy. But as the battle across the planet continues, it becomes clear it is a losing one. No matter what counter is used, or how hard humanity pushes back, or even what technology is deployed, they can't seem to stop the onslaught. Eventually, the secret plant in North America is completely overrun, with only the deepest recesses of the facility being even remotely demon-free. Currently besieged by these creatures, and with security forces not responding, a Spartan team was deployed to different sections of the facility, all tasked with different goals. One Spartan in particular is a veteran of the Human Covenant War, and basically a savior of humanity in that right. John 117 is tasked with descending into the deepest areas of this plant and uploading the AI known as Mendicant Bias into a data stream to be uploaded to the ships waiting overhead. If he fails, it is feared that the AI will be further corrupted by the Argent energy and demons, and seeing as this entity has the knowledge of everything human at this point, this would be an extinction level event. As the Master Chief descends and fights his way through, it becomes clear that this is unlike anything he's seen before, but even still, somewhat reminds him of the Flood due to all the gore. Encountering many species not previously known, they seem to be resistant to his boomstick, but with enough applied force and pressure, he continues on. Eventually reaching Mendicant Bias, Chief begins the upload process, but due to the absolute unit that is Mendicant Bias, this process will take some time for the upload to complete. As Chief waits for the progress bar to slowly load, a lone portal opens up across the room. A creature steps out that is much more hominid looking than those Chief has already fought, and this one appears to be able to speak. Wearing armor and wielding its own boomstick as well as an axe, Chief raises his armament as this thing is clearly hostile. So the question is, if Chief encountered a Marauder in this scenario, would Chief be able to survive and even defeat it? Well, joining me today, I have the Halo lore god himself, Hidden Xperia, and we will be discussing the strengths and weaknesses of both and what the ultimate outcome would be. And I remember the Salt on my Doomslayer versus Chief episode, so I am tasked more so with the Marauder take, and Hidden is tasked with the Chief side. So make sure to go check out his video as well to get a good idea on what is going on. But alright, let's get to it. First thing I would like to discuss is the Marauder. There are certain strengths that the Marauder possesses that you may not actually be aware of, but due to clues within Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, we can make a few assumptions about the Marauder which will help us later. Now I do want to say, expect a much more comprehensive breakdown of the Marauder in a future video, but first things first when talking about the Marauder is we need to figure out what a Night Sentinel is. For those that play Doom Eternal, I don't need to tell you anything, but for those that haven't yet, a Night Sentinel is a species with a completely separate evolutionary path from humanity. They evolved on their own planet, under their own conditions, through the randomness that is life. Compare it to almost how the Sarans evolved on Sarah in Gears of War. They look human, but they are technically not Homo sapiens. And due to this, the Night Sentinel possesses different attributes than humans do. One of those in particular being their brute strength. And how do I know that they have brute strength beyond that of a standard human? Well, let's take a trip back, shall we? So you're sitting there, and you would like to know, what does Vindication look like? In my Doomslayer versus Chief episode, I mentioned that Doom Guy and the Doomslayer are the same person, and man, I got flame broiled in the comments by people saying, actually Roanoke, the Doomslayer is a betrayer, so he's a Night Sentinel, therefore he cannot be the Doom Guy. To which I implored everybody to read the lore closely, and you see that he got his suit from the betrayer. Sweet, sweet justice. So what are they to say now, huh? So there's a reason that I bring this up besides to gloat and add to my own credibility, and it's because the Doom Guy and Doomslayer being the same person, we can get a generalized idea of their strength concerning Night Sentinels. When Doom Guy was a human, or more human, and not just pure Angry Boy hours, he was actually much stronger than your average man too. After being ordered to fire upon civilians prior to the events of Doom, the Doom Marine fatally punches his commanding officer and is subsequently sent to Mars as a punishment. And this is key. While it's totally possible to punch someone's life out in one hit, it is extremely rare and based on hitting at the right place with the right set of circumstances. But it is implied that the Doom Marine quite literally hit him once in the head, and that was enough force imparted into his body, or into the commander's body, to instantly end him. Not to mention, while on Mars and its moons, and eventually Hell itself, Doom Guy is taking damage that should more than likely completely body him. On top of this, in certain instances, Doom Guy can actually punch out demons, bodying them in the process as well. So all this would imply that Doom Guy is way stronger than a normal man, even when he is just a human, and well before he's blessed by the Seraphim, which is when he reaches unreal levels of strength. But prior to this blessing and after his time in Hell, he is transported to Argent Denur, where he is placed in the Colosseum. These Night Sentinels battle in the Colosseum for the chance to regain their honor and be sent to the front lines after committing some crime against their laws. And this is where we get a look at Night Sentinel strength. Those thrown into the Colosseum with Doom Guy receive their fair share of abuse, but so does the Doom Marine. Able to survive hits from Doomguy, this would imply that the Night Sentinel physiology is more sturdy than that of a human's. And on top of this, the Night Sentinels are also dishing out hits to Doomguy that they claim make him mortally wounded, but he survives anyhow. Being able to mortally wound the Doomguy, or at least cause wounds that would be considered as such, would also imply that the Night Sentinels are capable of strength not seen on Earth. And this is actually to be expected. First, the Night Sentinels are a warrior society. They pledge allegiance to their king and are bred for battle, at least the soldiers that choose to fight, as there are civilians. In fact, another example of their strength and allegiance is when the Night Sentinels are actually trapped in hell by the Makers. They end up fighting to the last man, that being the Doomslayer, but even with handheld spears, they're able to take out many demons, something that humans with boomsticks do not seem to be really all that capable of. Plus, if the Betrayer is anything to go off of, then the Night Sentinel physiology is basically being an absolute beast. So why the history lesson of the Night Sentinels? Because the Marauders are nothing more than corrupted Night Sentinels. Those that sided with the Khan Maker would be resurrected as the Marauder, and not only wield the strength their species naturally possesses, but also the strength that the Argent energy and demonization the Argent energy brings on, which we have seen in other species who are altered by this. The sturdiness of the Night Sentinel species also should be noted by how they are changed with the introduction of Argent energy as compared to humans changed. Soldiers changed by Argent energy concerning Homo sapiens are relatively weak, only being mildly stronger than their original origins. To the Doomslayer, these soldiers are easily brought down and destroyed, so really they're more just basically ammo pinatas than anything. But the Night Sentinels are something to be much more respected in the battlefield. Apart from their natural strength and physiology as well as those attributes demonic in nature, the Marauder also has the ability and tools at its disposal that humans just don't. Possessing a super boomstick, this is capable of doing damage to the Night Sentinel armor, as we have seen. It will wield this readily, and should anyone get close, it can cause devastating damage. The Marauder also has an axe made out of the same energy as the Doomslayer's crucible, the same crucible that is able to cut through the toughest demons like butter and destroy the icon of sin with a single hit to the brain. This axe that the Marauder has can also be thrown with energy leaving its hand. This energy slices through the air, causing a fair amount of damage to anyone that is caught in its path, but should you get close, it can also swing this axe, embedding it into your body, but more than likely just straight cutting you in half if you don't have any armor on. The offensive capability is great concerning the Marauder, but its dodge ability is otherworldly. To our perception, and to the Doomslayer's perception, the movement of a Marauder is hard to keep track of. Possessing its own boost kit, it is able to move across the battlefield in a blur. A fraction of a second is all it takes to move left or right by a good 20 feet, and this would make hitting the Marauder extremely tough. But let's say you did get a shot off, it still isn't guaranteed to do damage, because much like the hard light shields that humans use, the Marauder has an Argent energy hard light shield of its own. Completely blocking incoming projectiles, this shield can be raised at a moment's notice and stop anything from lead to concussive force to plasma energy. But the same energy has another purpose as well. Let's say all these defenses are bypassed, and let's say you get a hit in. Even then, the Marauder is able to survive wounds and hits due to Argent energy coursing through its body that normally would take out other Night Sentinels. Another advantage that the Marauder has is also the ability to spawn corrupted wolves. Before Argent took hold, wolves were said to appear to all those that were worthy. These spirit wolves would lead a Night Sentinel to a desired object. However, after the Argent took hold, these spirit wolves can now be spawned in to do the will of the Marauder. These wolves do very real damage to enemies of the Marauder, but this also makes it a two-front attack. All of this gives the Marauder a massive combat advantage not normally seen in humans, or even in other Night Sentinels. But now I throw you back on over to Hidden Xperia for Chief's combat advantages.
So, Chief's strengths. Where the hell do we begin? Augmentations. Let's start there. So, as a Spartan 2, Chief, John, underwent a number of biochemical augmentations that strengthened his body and mind in almost every way imaginable. So let's cover a few of those first and the upper hand that they would give him. Surgery is performed on the occipital lobe to redirect blood flow beneath the rods and cones in the eyes, which vastly improves visual perception. An advanced carbide ceramic material is grafted onto the skeleton, which creates virtually unbreakable bones. A platinum pellet is placed in the left thyroid gland, which contains a human growth hormone, rapidly boosting the growth of skeletal and muscular tissue. A protein is also injected into the muscles, which targets the molecular machinery within their cells and again vastly increases muscle strength, and also endurance as well. Bioelectric nerve transduction is also modified into shielded electronic transduction, which provides not only a 300% increase in reflexes, but also a massive increase in intelligence, memory, and creativity. Now, not only do these augmentations make Chief's body extremely strong, but the perception and reflex enhancements are so drastic, they give him an almost like supernatural ability known as Spartan Time, where his reflexes are so fast that he's able to think, see, and react in pretty much slow motion. But it only gets crazier. When Chief puts on his Mjolnir Mark 6 powered assault armor, these abilities are enhanced even further. The plating, built from titanium alloy, is almost entirely resistant to ballistics and covered in a refractive coating to help dissipate the heat from a plasma impact. And fully covering the armor are reverse-engineered energy shield systems, which add yet another layer of defense, particularly against ballistics, which can often get deflected by the shields back at the one who fired them. Beneath the armor plating is an undersuit, and beneath that undersuit is a skin suit, both of which are covered in a refractive coating which dissipate the heat from plasma impacts, and both of which are extremely strong, and then between both of them is a hydrostatic gel layer which offers protection against high velocity impacts and is even capable of locking the armor should an impact require it, to shield the limbs and joints from as much damage as possible. And then, between the undersuit and the armor plating is a reactive metal liquid crystal layer, which acts basically as like a synthetic muscle, improving Chief's strength by up to 5 times. In the incredibly rare occasion that Chief happens to get injured, then within the armor are automatic biofoam injectors, which provide on-the-go healing and pain suppression. But saying that, injuring someone as capable as 117 is next to impossible thanks to the further reflex and perception upgrades that his Mjolnir provides. Motion trackers provide constant 360-degree target detection. The heads-up display built into his helmet and visor give directional feedback should he be hit. Within his head is a neural implant which connects to the suit and essentially powers it with his brain. It sort of acts like a processor for the suit, but the processor is his brain, which removes any latency between thought and action. But most importantly, Chief has one thing that no other super soldier does. He has Cortana. I mean, the smartest AI in human history combined with superhuman reflexes and perception make Chief pretty much impossible to hit. But on the off chance he somehow does get hit, then it's by no means the end of the world. Auto repair systems in his armor can utilize nanomachines, everyone's favorite thing, to repair his suit on the fly, and bypass nodes allow power to be rerouted to avoid the damaged areas and ensure that the most important areas of his suit can function no matter what and no matter how much damage he undergoes. But we're not even done there. The argument could be made that Chief is the most proficient soldier in existence when it comes to firearms and just weapons in general, and on top of that, his immense strength allows him to dual wield just about anything, something that when combined with his perception and Cortana allows him to fire at multiple targets at once with extreme accuracy. And then on top of all of that, Chief has something that nobody else does. Luck. When it comes to combat proficiency, the Master Chief is pretty much unparalleled, to be quite honest. The magnum opus of human technological and combat progress. And you know, his luck really just is the cherry on top.
With Chief fleshed out, you can actually see that concerning strengths there are a lot of similarities, but with strength comes weakness as well. The Marauder is far from invincible. Resistance in no way means immune. First, concerning weakness, the Marauder has exposed pieces of its body. The armor, interestingly, does not actually cover internal organs all that well. Now, concerning the digestive tract and aortas of the Night Sentinels, it's not something referenced within the universe, so it would be impossible to know about its physiology, but if it exists, then it would definitely be in this expansion exposed area. Because of the lack of armor, the Marauder would be hit in these areas, leading to its own downfall. These holes become more of an issue when you realize that the Marauder is also capable of being injured by conventional boomsticks. The Doomslayer can use a multitude of boomsticks, ranging from highly concussive force to just more of the same. To use the Super Boomstick to the Plasma Handheld means that all of these are viable options when facing off against the Marauder, and after the Marauder attacks with an axe, it becomes extremely vulnerable to these counterattacks. And speaking of this vulnerable period, one of the largest weaknesses that the Marauder would have is that its enemy has something known as Spartan time. Hidden has already covered this, but let's just say Chief would have no problem keeping up with the movements of the Marauder. And lastly, the Marauder is still very much so capable of being damaged. With enough force and strength, a Marauder's bones can be broken, its limbs can be ripped off, its head destroyed, its skin torn. They are not immortal. Therefore, with enough training and quick reaction time, uncorrupted beings can overcome this Marauder. When facing off against the Doomslayer, we see just how vulnerable the Marauder is to sheer power and tactics. But the Chief is not the Doomslayer, and as such, he possesses his own set of weaknesses, which we will go back to Hidden Xperia to get a good understanding of those.
So, I know some of you are probably going to hate me for this, but as ridiculously strong as Chief may be in, like, almost every way imaginable, he's no Doomslayer. There are some weaknesses that could be exploited by the Marauder. Firstly, an obvious one, which might gloss over you at first. Chief is a human, and the Marauder is not. You've got to remember, right, the Marauder is essentially a corrupted, resurrected, undead Night Sentinel. And the Night Sentinels weren't human. They followed a different evolutionary path, so if you strip away the armor, and arguably all the augmentations as well, Chief is far weaker in comparison. His energy shields as well are also pretty weak, especially to plasma or any source of extreme heat. And it just so happens that the Marauder can launch a beam of extremely hot Argent energy, which, as far as we know, functions pretty similar to plasma in the Halo universe, which would almost certainly melt directly through his shields, and regardless of the several refractive coatings on his armor, his undersuit, and his skin suit, would also melt through those as well. I mean, Linda's Mjolnir, when she was wearing Mark V, was burnt straight through, and she was almost killed by just a few shots of a plasma pistol. So this Argent energy blast would almost certainly wound Chief, that is, if it were to hit him. Another thing related to his shields is that if they were to drop, I would hazard a guess that his Mjolnir could not withstand a swing or two from the Marauder's axe. Now, we can assume that the blades on this battle axe are made from a sort of like solid Argent energy, the same sort of energy that creates the blade on the Crucible, which is extremely sharp, which functions, I think, a little bit like Hard Light or the plasma from an energy sword in the Halo universe. And so, it would slice directly through his plating just like an energy sword can, opening Chief up to the possibility of impalement and even dismemberment, something that Biofoam will do jack shit to stop. The final weakness that I can think of, and trust me, coming up with weaknesses for Chief has been very, very difficult. The final one that I can think of might take you by surprise. Chief's strength. Now, don't get me wrong, Chief is strong. Very, very strong. There's no doubt there. But the Marauder is capable of killing the bloody Doomslayer with melee. If he can kill the Doomslayer, a literal demigod, then, with respect, Chief stands no chance, so CQC, for once, is not his friend in this battle. And they are the only weaknesses for Chief that I can quite honestly think of. There might be some more, but as far as I'm aware, there's very little about Chief that's weak.
So what happens if you send two ridiculously powerful beings to the same place to retrieve the same item with conflicting views? Well, in this case, it's the age-old question of, is it better to be strong or fast? As Chief works to upload Mendicant to a more mobile platform, a portal opens up. Unbeknownst to the Chief, the Marauder was informed by his superiors, the Makers, that retrieving this AI would be paramount to the success of this invasion and conquering of Earth. As the Marauder exits the portal, Chief at this point has absolutely torn through demons and recognizes recognizes the glowing red eyes and pale white skin. Chief immediately goes on the offensive and begins firing at the demon. The irony isn't lost that Chief is actually called a demon as well, but then again, all we see are demons fighting demons, so maybe this isn't too out of the ordinary. The Marauder instantly brings up his shield to block the incoming projectiles and couples it with a dash. The Marauder gets in close, but Chief isn't like the other demons and humans the Marauder is used to dealing with. Almost preemptively, Chief is able to jump back just as the Marauder starts its dash, causing it to completely miss. The augmentations within Chief and his Spartan time, as well as overhauled reflexes, allow him to quite literally dodge the Marauder, something that even the Doomslayer is not known to do. Based on this, the Marauder spawns in a wolf to aid in his attack, the Marauder assuming that Chief is one human, and multitasking would make him much more vulnerable. The issue with this plan is that the Chief is not actually alone. Cortana places a nav point over the wolf for constant detection. This, coupled with the motion tracker, makes the wolf extremely vulnerable to counterattack, but that's not all the wolf has going against it. As we know, the wolf is extremely susceptible to damage. As the wolf latches onto Chief's armor, much like when the Flood Infection form attacked Chief and his energy shielding was able to destroy it, the same is used on the wolf. Cortana routes an electrical shock to the bite area, using the shield to dissipate the wolf. The Marauder, utilizing its previous life as a warrior, begins to learn Chief's movements and abilities. While Chief is marginally distracted by the wolf attack, the Marauder gets in close with the super shotgun and takes out Chief's remaining shields. But due to the nature of this boomstick, he must actually reload before attacking again. Having just enough time to put in some more shells, he fires again, but Chief's armor is as strong, if not stronger, than the ancient Night Sentinel armor. They also appear to be composed of similar materials as well. As the back and forth continues, despite the Marauder's speed and tenacity, Chief is just slightly faster due once again to his perception increases and mental connection to his armor. The reaction time exhibited by Chief is almost something that the Marauder has trouble keeping up with. With the speed differences, as the Marauder goes in for another attack, Chief uses the BR before the Marauder can raise its shield. The lack of body shielding on the Marauder also allows for physical damage to begin building up. Marauder goes for the counter and throws the axe at the Chief, and it turns out to be a direct hit, but hits the strongest point, which is the chest plate. The chest plate is damaged in the process, but Chief's body remains functional and slightly injured. Biofoam is injected into the wounds, and without missing cadence, the Marauder swings his axe, which is dodged again due to Spartan time. At this point, energy shielding would begin to recover on Chief after an axe hit due to the efficiency of the mini fusion reactor battery that he has. The Marauder dashes in, but it's apparent he is becoming injured. Chief throws a grenade, which lands behind him as the concussive force ripples through the body of the Marauder. To keep pressure on Chief, the Marauder spawns in a wolf once again. Chief, utilizing the dual wielding ability, keeps counter pressure on the wolf and the Marauder. The Marauder uses his shield to block it, but the wolf is destroyed in the process. By now, it's becoming clear that Chief and the Marauder are fairly injured, both showing signs. As we know, all basic boomsticks are a viable option against this demon. A plasma gun is picked up by Chief from a fallen security guard in the area, and Chief now understands there is a moment of vulnerability after the Marauder attacks and begins firing on it during this point. The Argent energy flowing through the Marauder protects it for quite a few hits, but eventually the organic areas are overwhelmed by heat and concussive force. The Marauder once again throws its axe energy at Chief, but with full energy shields, it is entirely deflected at the loss of the shielding, and Chief gets in another hit. The Marauder is injured worse at this point due to the exposed holes in its armor and all previous hits that the armor has taken. Chief's armor and body are also suffering to some degree, but with the biofoam and shielding, it's less substantial. As the wounds begin to mount, the Marauder slows down even more. Being bodied by sort of like a 1,000 cuts scenario, in a last-ditch effort, the Marauder goes in to use its strength, considering it is not of Earth and instead is a Night Sentinel. But with Chief's augmentations and the power his suit gives him, he matches the Marauder in these aspects. Coupled with the injuries the Marauder has, Chief is able to overwhelm the demon before putting a knife between its horns, destroying the brain in the process. So I can hear the rees now. Can you guys hear them? I can. Maybe it's just my tinnitus. The Chief wins in this scenario because with his armor, AI companion tracking the wolf, regenerative energy shielding that can cancel out hits from the axe, biofoam to heal injuries he sustains or at minimum patch them so that he can keep going, the usage of Spartan time, which if you think about it, is not actually just a gimmick. If you actually have read into what Spartan time is, seconds can feel like minutes to Spartan, which, like I said, I suggest looking it up because it's pretty interesting. But with all of these, it's going to be a direct counter to the Marauder's strengths and just slightly better. The Chief would be injured during the battle, no doubt, and let's say that the Marauder was able to completely chop off a limb, biofoam is not going to do anything for that. But again, the Marauder relies on speed and his wolf to overwhelm the enemies, of which the Chief can actually overcome these. So as far as we know, the Marauder is a great fighter against the Doomslayer, not because of its strength, strength, but because of its speed and ability to have a multi-front attack with that wolf. The Doomslayer also is not known to have increased reaction time either, just an unstoppable rage and strength. Because of this, if anything could see the Marauder move, it would be massively devastating to its advantage on the battlefield, and this is exactly what Chief is equipped to do. What looks like innate knowledge of the Marauder is really just the ability to perceive faster. And personally, this makes sense to me. The Chief may lose to the Doomslayer because of the ridiculous strength that the Doomslayer has and just his sheer unadulterated ability to survive wounds. The Chief would not be able to contend with this under a prolonged scenario, but a Marauder is a much easier target. Getting past the speed that the Marauder has, and you'll find that there are quite a few weaknesses that the Chief can exploit. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and I want to thank Hidden Xperia for working on this collaboration with me. Like I said, it's always a good time to have the Halo lore god himself on this channel, and I also want to know what you guys think down in the comments. Yes, we all know that the Marauder was difficult to take out, but if you've ever noticed, it gets way easier as you go along. So you gotta kind of wonder, that's just human perception and not like super soldier vision. So just something to think about. Anyhow, leaving a like would be great, because we're gonna have to cancel out all the angry comments that I'm about to get. And if you are new and enjoyed, subbing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and second as well as third channel links in the description if anyone is interested in that. And I would also like to thank a few of my patrons real quick. I want to do a huge shout out to our two astronauts, It's Not a Spoon and Trey Windenall. Thank you guys for your awesome support. It is greatly appreciated. I would also like to thank our scientist, Skilt. Thank you as well, my guy. And to the rest of my patrons, like I said, I massively appreciate your help during this time. YouTube has been in a flux for this whole month, so Patreon is a great way to sort of keep things stable. So thank you. Anyhow, that about does it for me. If you haven't watched Hidden Xperia's video on this, I'd say definitely check out that video. And if you like it, go ahead and subscribe to him as well. All right, thank you guys for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one.